Before you jump to conclusions, pause for a second. This video isn't meant to be comfortable, and that's exactly why it's important. There's a quiet imbalance shaping modern dating, confidence, and even our psychology. Most people never notice it, because it flatters one side while silently starving the other. Men have sensed it for years. They've felt it, observed it, and been mocked for noticing it. Today, we strip away the emotion and look at the mechanism behind it. Picture two people opening the same app, same effort, same intention. One gets instant affirmation, the other gets nothing. That gap doesn't just bruise feelings, it rewires expectations, behavior, and even self-worth. Dark psychology calls this reinforcement conditioning, and it changes how power moves, often without anyone realizing. Validation isn't neutral. It trains entitlement, patience, risk-taking, even how we perceive time. When it's constant, reality bends. When it's absent, pressure hardens. Here's the tension. What feels like privilege today can become a trap tomorrow, and most people never notice. Here's where the imbalance starts to affect the mind. When validation comes effortlessly, the brain stops distinguishing between earned value and received attention. Dopamine doesn't care where the approval comes from. It just records that it arrived. Over time, this creates what psychologists call a false baseline. Elevation. You start believing this level of affirmation is normal, deserved, permanent. Now imagine living inside that loop every day. Likes, comments, messages, smiles that linger longer, doors opening without asking. You don't consciously register it as privilege because nothing feels excessive. It just feels life. But psychology doesn't care about intention, it cares about exposure. Repeated signals become assumptions. Meanwhile, the man on the other side experiences scarcity, silence, indifference, conditional respect. His brain adapts differently. He doesn't expect life to reward him. He expects resistance, and resistance sharpens awareness. Two environments, two psychologies, one illusion quietly forming, one realism painfully forged. And the collision between them, it's inevitable. Let's get into the illusion itself, because this is where perception quietly fractures. When approval arrives without effort, the mind draws a dangerous conclusion. Time is abundant. There's no urgency, no pressure, no reason to choose. Psychologists call this temporal distortion through reinforcement. When rewards keep coming, the brain assumes they always will, so decisions get delayed. Commitment feels optional. Tomorrow always feels safer than today. Why settle when attention keeps refreshing itself? Every notification whispers the same lie. You're fine, you're winning, you can wait. But here's the problem. Biology doesn't pause. Markets don't stop. Value shifts silently while attention masks the movement. The feedback loop celebrates the present while quietly stealing the future. Men don't experience this distortion. Scarcity forces timing awareness early. When nothing reassures you, you plan. When no one validates you, you build. Pressure becomes a teacher. And here's the cliffhanger. One side spends time thinking it's infinite. The other learns it's not. When reality corrects the illusion, it doesn't do it gently. This correction doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, disguised as confusion. The attention slows, not stops, just enough to feel unfamiliar. The same posts no longer get the same response. Effort produces weaker signals. Psychologists call this reward decay. When the brain expects yesterday's response from today's environment. And this is when subtle panic begins. Not dramatic panic, subtle panic. The feeling that something changed without permission. The illusion said time was endless. Reality says time has a cost. Men recognize this immediately because they've lived there all their lives. Women experiencing it for the first time feel betrayed, not by people, but by a system that trained their expectations. The validation never warned them it was temporary. It just faded. Here's the cruel twist. The longer someone relied on external affirmation, the weaker their internal foundation becomes. When the noise drops, there's nothing underneath. That's when the real danger begins. Now we reach the part most people avoid, because it exposes character under pressure. When constant validation disappears, it doesn't just remove comfort, it reveals dependency. Psychologists call this externalized self-worth collapse. If your identity was built on being desired, silence feels like erasure. This is why some people become anxious, desperate, or even bitter when attention fades. They weren't losing value, they were losing the mirror that told them who they were. And without that mirror, panic fills the gap. Posting increases, standards shift, anger disguises itself as empowerment. Men rarely face this collapse because they were never fed validation consistently. Their self-worth, if it exists, was forged internally through competence, failure, and effort. Painful, yes, but stable. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Validation builds confidence only while it lasts. Character is what remains after it's gone. Not everyone survives that transition. Now let's talk about entitlement, because this is where misunderstanding turns into conflict. Entitlement doesn't begin as arrogance. It starts as pattern, recognition gone wrong. When the world repeatedly treats you as special, the mind quietly upgrades expectations. Psychologists call this conditioned superiority, not chosen, installed. When attention flows effortlessly, effort feels unnecessary. When admiration is constant, reciprocity feels optional. This is why some women feel confused when a man doesn't chase, doesn't overinvest, doesn't perform. Equality feels like neglect. Calm feels like boredom. Respect without worship feels wrong. Men sense this immediately. They feel measured, auditioned, compared not against other men, but against the invisible competition of attention itself. A phone full of proof that they are replaceable. Here's the fracture point. Relationships collapse not from cruelty, but from mismatched psychological baselines. One expects elevation. The other expects cooperation. Neither understands why it feels broken. Now contrast that with the rare exceptions, because exceptions reveal the rule. Occasionally, you meet a woman untouched by the validation loop. Attractive yet grounded, desired yet unentitled. Psychologists call this identity. Insulation. Her self-worth was built somewhere attention couldn't reach. She doesn't assume pursuit. She doesn't demand performance. She doesn't interpret equality as disrespect, and men feel it instantly. Interactions are lighter, safer, real, no auditions, no invisible scoreboard, no pressure to prove worth. These women didn't escape because they had less beauty. They escaped because their identity wasn't outsourced. Maybe they developed skills first. Maybe they were valued for contribution, not appearance. Maybe they simply questioned the feedback instead of absorbing it. Here's the tension. They are rare, often overlooked early, but long-term they are chosen. When attention fades, they remain intact. When the market shifts, they adapt. And this is where awareness changes everything. Now let's expose the amplifier that made all of this unavoidable. Social media didn't create the imbalance, it industrialized it. Psychologists call this algorithmic reinforcement. Escalation. Attention is no longer occasional. It's engineered, optimized, infinite. Before phones, validation had limits. You could only be admired where you physically existed. Now admiration follows you everywhere. A device that never sleeps. A feedback machine that never questions. Every like teaches the same lesson. You are in demand. Here's the hidden cost. When validation becomes ambient, comparison becomes distorted. Real people are measured against digital fantasy. No man competes with thousands of curated admirers. No relationship survives comparison with imagined perfection. Men feel this pressure but can't articulate it. Women feel dissatisfaction but can't locate its source. And the algorithm? It profits from the confusion. Here's the cliff. When artificial abundance meets real-world scarcity, disappointment becomes inevitable, and nobody is prepared for the emotional crash that follows. Here's where the advantage flips, and almost nobody sees it coming. The same system that front-loads attention also accelerates decline. Psychologists call this delayed asymmetry reversal. What rises fast falls fast. What compounds slowly endures. Men age into value if they build correctly. Skills deepen. Status stabilizes. Confidence becomes real, not mirrored. Their trajectory points upward because it was never inflated early. Women who relied on attention feel the reversal as loss, even if they're still objectively valuable. And the contrast? It hurts more than the change itself. This is why resentment explodes on both sides. Women feel misled. Men feel invisible for too long, then suddenly desired. Timing misaligns. Expectations clash. Attraction misses its window. And here's the twist. The system didn't favor either side long-term. It borrowed from the future. It rewarded youth and punished awareness. Only those who saw the pattern early escaped the damage. Now comes the final question. What do you do once you see it? Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And that's where responsibility begins. Dark psychology isn't about blame. It's about leverage. Understanding the system gives you the power to stop being controlled by it. For men, the move is simple but difficult. Stop competing for attention. You can't win that game. Build what attention can't replace. Competence, stability, purpose. Choose women who don't treat you like an option, but like a partner. Awareness is your filter. For women, the path is harder, but more rewarding. Question the feedback. Don't confuse desire with destiny. Use your peak leverage wisely, not passively. Build an identity that survives silence. Choose character over admiration. Reality over illusion. The privilege was real. The trap was real. And the cost of ignoring it is paid later with interest. This isn't about winning. It's about not losing your future to a system that profits from distortion. Understand the game. Play it consciously. And never mistake attention for value.